Well, yes, indeed. As you see in that welcoming slide, Mr. Emmanuel Mok is the National Chairman of National Transformation Party. He joins us next to talk about the build-up to the 2015 elections. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
Do you also think it's a distraction, all this talk about qualification or not? Or are we just focusing on things that don't matter? Or should we just move on to issues of the economy and address such issues?
I don't think it's a distraction. I think it's wrong. I think it's very wrong for INEC to have allowed, for INEC to have accepted the certificate of Major General Buhari, because the rules for submission of candidates by political parties have clearly defined requirements: task clearance, qualifications, and nomination or endorsements by people from different wards and different local governments across the country. And when all of these three different things, parameters have not been met, INEC is not supposed to collect those documents.
But INEC doesn't have powers to disqualify anyone, whatever you submit.
No, INEC has powers. INEC has powers to disqualify. If you say INEC does not have powers, INEC is the only person implementing the Electoral Act. And the Electoral Act has defined clearly the rules of engagement for candidates, for political parties, and all of that. And this
because I'm going through it, and it says, yes, the Commission shall, that's Section 31(3), the Commission shall, within 7 days of the receipt of the personal particulars of the candidate, publish same in the constituency where the candidate intends to contest the election. And then 5 says, any person who has reasonable grounds to believe that any information given by a candidate in the affidavit or any document submitted by the candidate is false may file a suit in the High Court of a state or Federal High Court against such a person seeking declaration that the information contained in the affidavit is false. So it's not INEC.
INEC, from what you've just read here now, INEC is supposed to collect affidavits and documents from each of the candidates. Now, meanwhile, there are places, it's also stated, especially in the forms of INEC, the minimum requirement, which at least is a school certificate. That's the minimum requirement for you to qualify to contest. It's specified. Okay. So when you are submitting your documents, INEC has people. We've submitted documents. INEC has people that will vet each of the candidates and their documents. When one is not complete, they give it back to you that this is not complete.
Let me bring up this other one. Have you collected your PVC?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so so far, in terms of the entire process, what's your assessment of that particular one?
Sincerely, I am very disappointed with INEC.
Why?
Very, very disappointed with INEC. In 2011, before 2010, political party leaders and INEC, we had so many meetings, programs, looking at how to make the elections free and fair. So much was done. So 2011 general elections was like a test case for INEC for conducting credible general elections. Now, this is 2015 general election we're talking about, 4 years after, and we are worse than we were. In 2011, there were about 70-something million registered voters. And now in 2015, there are about 60 or 60-something. In fact, from what I hear, about 57 million that INEC is finally presenting or so.
I think now the total number of eligible voters is 68.8 million. I'll have to check on that, but it's within that range.
Within that range. So it's still less than what we had in 2011 after 4 years. Meanwhile, realize that the population of Nigeria is now hovering around 170 million people. So even if it were 60 million, even if it was 70 million people, it's less than, that means the registered voters to vote in this very keenly contested presidential election are less than 50% of the population. That's a failure for INEC after 4 years. After 4 years. The GSM networks have biometric data of at least 120 million Nigerians. That's a fact. Because I've taken the pains, I'm very interested in this. I've made so many comments about the fact that INEC is going to cause problems. Because you see, when you have such a contested election like this across the whole country, the only way to maintain peace is for the person who wants to clearly have won. You cannot come to the election with less than 30% of the population, and then within that 30% that wants to choose the president.
So I don't understand. I mean,
Now,
are
no,
you saying
on the question you were asking, that how do I see the whole process? Listen, INEC had 4 years to register people to ensure that if they wanted to use PVC cards for this election, those PVC cards should have been distributed at least a year ago for close to 90 million Nigerians, not 60. At least 170 million people. If you take out of that picture people over 85 who might not be able to come out of their houses to vote, and very young people below 18, let's say we take out 25% of that population. You have about 140 million people that are supposed to vote in this election.
Is it also going to be INEC's fault if, assuming they have 90 million people on the list, and then when they conduct the second stage in that process to get a valid voter register, which happens to be the AFIS,
yeah.
when they clean up the entire system and
yeah.
get the authentic people.
Yeah.
So if the number drops, would it also be their fault? Because that could be what has happened in some cases.
No, that's not it. See, I spoke with somebody in one of these major IT companies. Why are we having this problem? Can they not have solved this problem? We have a country, we are a modern country now. All what we need can be done. Now, I spoke to them and they said, if this job had been given, say, 3-4 years ago to do it, by this time there will be a database where everybody's data is on, like you have in the US. Everybody's social security and data card is on. This is what the president is now trying to do with this national identity card scheme.
Pardon me to jump in again. Does this view of yours also take into cognizance when their budget was submitted, when funds was actually released to them?
When you bring this up for the budget of 2014 for INEC. INEC had a budget 2012. No matter how late, it was released 2012. INEC had a budget 2013. INEC had a budget 2014. INEC has no reason to have only less than 70 million people voting for this election.
You saw what happened at the National Assembly yesterday.
Yes.
Specifically the House of Representatives.
I agree, yes.
And you agree with the suggestion by Femi Gbajabiamila.
Yesterday, I was on Voice of Nigeria. And my own suggestion is that we should totally disregard INEC's permanent and temporary voter cards. We have 170 million people who are going to vote in this election. I believe that the most number of people should vote.
So what do we vote?
Now, I'm coming, just hear me. My view is this. First, the security forces don't vote. The police alone is almost 1 million people. And they are going to be on security duties on that day. The army, the civil defense and security corps, and the rest of them will be on duty. So put together, you have close to 2 million or 1.5 million people that are going to be on official assignment on that day. All the youth corps members that are going there. My view is, on the day of election, on February 14 especially, there are going to be 3 elections on that day. Good. There's not going to be movement. Except within your ward. You can't move. The security forces are going to ensure that. My view is that all the security forces, there will be accreditation in the morning from, say, 8 till maybe 12 of voters. During the period of accreditation, all the security forces on security duties vote, wherever they are. The security forces vote first. Then the youth corps with them vote at that time. Everybody who wants to vote in Nigeria would come out and line up. There's not going to be movement. If the IG, he has 1 million people under him. If the IG is serious, these elections will be free and fair, as the president has tried to do in all the other places.
So what will they use?
Good. On that day, they accredit voters. Accreditation is you come to the polling point, there's a long line, each person comes, and the person on duty takes down your name on that day. That's just, they are youth corpers. These are educated people. They take everybody on the line for 4 hours. They accredit them. At 12 o'clock, they stop accreditation. Everybody accredited votes. That's the best for this country because, look, in the Northeast, there's a clear war in the Northeast. A place as large as the south of Nigeria and Southeast put together has been taken over by insurgents. Populations, towns have been burnt and people have been totally moved. All my family, I come from a very large family. All my family in Sokoto, in Borno, in Kano, in Birnin Kebbi, in Niger, even some in Abuja and Kaduna, have all come to the south. All. Their PVCs are in the north. Those PVCs are what INEC is. Who's going to vote for them?
So if I'm aggrieved, how do I get those ballots in case I need to go to the tribunal?
See, there's no question about irregularity in the election. I am talking about accreditation of voters. Accreditation of voters is going to be public. Everybody's on the line. If you remember the June 12 open
Option
secrets,
A4.
option A4, this is not, it's Something like that, but not exactly that. Everybody's accredited in the open. And maybe we all have 5 fingers. They have these permanent inks that they use for voting. You get accredited, one finger is painted. Okay? At the time when they stop accreditation, nobody's allowed to enter the line. Then people begin to vote. The second finger is painted. That ink cannot clean that day. So you cannot vote twice. And remember, there is restriction of movement across the local government. So that you can't even move from this to another place to go and start voting. It's not going to be possible. After the election, remember, I was one of those that insisted that you don't leave the polling unit. And I tell you there are people who are going to be there. Immediately after voting, all the vote in the ballot box is poured out. It cannot be better than that. And it's counted in the presence of everybody waiting. So that you know at the polling booth the result of that election there.